I'm Sydney Offit, and I was 34 the day my mother decided my sister's whole life was a rumor to be managed. Cassie was 19. There was a photograph, and there was talk. And in Marlin Creek, talk travels faster than truth ever could. So, my parents found a husband for her before the gossip could cool. A good family, a good name, a quiet wedding to make a loud problem disappear. My sister was too frightened to say a single word about any of it. I didn't raise my voice when it came undone. I asked one question at the engagement lunch, set a folded piece of paper on the table, and watched the whole arrangement fall apart before the plates were cleared. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary women face impossible families and answer them with steadiness instead of noise. I tell true feeling stories about the moment someone finally stops keeping the peace. I live 3 hours from where I grew up in Charleston, in a one-bedroom apartment that is mine and paid for and quiet. I'm a paralegal at a family law firm. That means I spend my days inside other people's worst weeks. Custody, annulments, and people who sign things they were too scared to read. I was the first Offit to leave Marlin Creek without being carried out. My family is proud of that the way you're proud of a scar. I call home every Sunday at 6 o'clock. I have done it for 11 years. Not because the calls are warm, but because somewhere in the back of my chest, there's a debt I've never paid off, and her name is Cassie. She was 4 when I left for school. I told myself she'd be fine in that house. I told myself a lot of things. My mother runs that house by rule and by appearance, and my father runs the feed and hardware store on Main with his own name painted gold across the window, Offit's. The name is the business, and the business is the name, and both sit heavier on my family than anything you could weigh. So when the phone rang at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night and the screen said Mom, I sat straight up in the dark. My mother does not call late. Phone calls after 9 o'clock are for emergencies and bad character. There's talk about your sister, my mother said. No hello. Her voice was pulled tight as fence wire. We're handling it. I asked what kind of talk. The kind that follows a family, she said. The kind that doesn't wash out. Cassie has been seen somewhere she shouldn't have been at an hour that looked bad and people are saying things. What things? I said. It doesn't matter what's true, she replied. It matters what they think they saw. In the background, I heard a steady wipe and squeak. I knew without being told she was polishing the dining table in the good front room. The whole house would smell like lemon oil, the sharp scent of our family putting its best face on. Mom, I said, is Cassie okay? There was a pause that lasted a beat too long. Cassie will be fine if she just does what's sensible. Sensible. In my mother's mouth, that word has teeth. She told me to come up that weekend and to wear something nice. We were having guests. I drove up Saturday morning with a knot in my stomach. Around here, a last name is a credit score, a criminal record, and a marriage license all at once. I stopped for gas at the edge of town, and the man behind the counter looked at me a half-second too long, then looked away fast. In a town like this, by the time a rumor reaches you, it's been to church twice and supper 4 times. I passed Main Street and saw my father's truck parked outside the store. That alone told me how bad it was. My father never leaves the store on a Saturday. The store is where he keeps his dignity. I got the real story in pieces, and the real story was almost nothing. 2 weeks back, Cassie had driven her friend Becca home from a graduation party. Becca was sick drunk, crying, and scared to call her own folks. Cassie helped her up the stairs to Becca's apartment, stayed until she stopped shaking, and left a little after 2 o'clock in the morning. Someone across the lot saw a girl leaving the building before dawn. The building also belonged to Becca's brother, who had been asleep the whole time. By the time the story reached the church parking lot, my 19-year-old sister had spent the night with a man. By the time it reached my mother's kitchen, she was as good as ruined. That's the entire crime. A kind girl doing a kind thing in the dark. I told my mother what actually happened, every detail, names, and times. She listened with her arms crossed. When I finished, she said the thing I will hear in my sleep for the rest of my life. It isn't about what happened, Sydney. It's about what people believed. What do you plan to do about a lie? I asked. She wiped a spot off the counter that wasn't there. We're going to give them a better story to tell. Cassie is going to get engaged. I laughed because it had to be a joke. She did not laugh. To whom? I asked. To a good young man from a good family, she said. I told her Cassie was 19, that she had plans for nursing school in the fall. My mother lifted her chin. Plans don't keep a roof over a reputation. Her feelings don't matter, Sydney, only what people will say. It's nearly settled, she added, smoothing the tablecloth. The Vances are coming for supper tonight. My father came in at 5 o'clock and explained the rest the way he explains a feed order. Garrett Vance has agreed to marry your sister. A wedding settles things. People stop talking when there's a ring and a date. There was a small town election coming up. My father was up for a seat on the church board and a spot on the bank's local council. Honors that mean everything to a man who has spent 50 years being respectable. A scandal would sink both. I asked if he understood he was trading his daughter to win a vote. He didn't flinch. I'm protecting this family, he said. And the worst part is, he believed it. I went upstairs to find my sister before the Vances arrived. Cassie was sitting on the edge of her bed in a dress she hadn't picked, twisting a ring around her finger. They'd given it to her before they'd given her a choice. It was a Vance heirloom, sized for a different woman, and it slid loose every time she turned it. I sat beside her and asked gently if she wanted this. She looked at the carpet. Mom says it's the only way to fix it. She says Garrett's nice. She says I'll learn to. What do you want, Cassie? Cassie's eyes filled with tears. I want them to stop being ashamed of me, she whispered. I'll just try to be a good girl about it. That's not consent. I've sat across conference tables from 100 people who were told to smile and sign. It's surrender wearing Yes's clothes. I put my hand over hers and stilled the ring. I made myself one promise. I was not going to drive away and leave my sister behind again. Downstairs, Maribeth Vance came through our front door like she was inspecting a property she intended to buy. She was 60, silver-haired and sweet as a poison pie. Behind her came Garrett, 26, broad and already bored. He shook my father's hand too hard, barely looked at Cassie, and when he did, it was the look you give a used car you've already agreed to buy. During dinner, the parents talked right over the two people it supposedly concerned. At one point, I steered the conversation toward what Cassie thought, and Maribeth set down her fork, smiling with her whole cold face. This isn't about feelings, dear, it's about families. Then Garrett, helping himself to more ham, added, she'll settle in fine, they all do. He said it the way you'd say a fence would hold. Cassie stared at her plate, turning the ring around and around. After dessert, the men went to the porch, and the mothers went to the kitchen. I made myself useful clearing plates so I could listen. Over coffee, the truth came out. The Vances wanted the back 40. The strip of Offit land that ran along the creek behind my father's store, which he had refused to sell for 20 years. Furthermore, Garrett had a problem from the spring involving a girl 2 counties over and a check that quieted it. His mother wanted him visibly, respectably married before it could resurface. This wasn't a rescue, it was a swap. My sister's name to cover Garrett's past, my father's land to seal the deal, and everyone's reputation laundered through one white dress. Cassie was just the contract term. The next morning, I tried the gentle way. I sat my parents down and made the calm case. Cassie was a legal adult who had not freely agreed to anything. We could let the rumor die, send her to nursing school, and let her live. My father looked out the window. She'll be taken care of. The Vances are solid people. Being taken care of and being free aren't the same thing, I said. Did anyone actually ask Cassie what she wants? My mother's jaw tightened. My father said, in this house, no isn't an answer. Then my mother delivered the real blow. The Vances wanted the wedding moved up to just 6 weeks away. A short engagement, she said, looks confident. That night I sat in my old bedroom with my laptop. I couldn't simply kidnap her. She was an adult, and if she got scared, she'd come right back. I couldn't out-argue a town that didn't care about the truth. Then, I stopped thinking like a daughter and started thinking like a paralegal. I opened a blank document and typed into the search bar, Marriage, Duress, West Virginia. The screen filled. I recognized the shape of what I was reading. It was a door. In the morning, I called Ruth, the senior attorney at my firm. I told her the situation, and she walked me through the law. A marriage in West Virginia is a civil contract, Ruth explained. Like any contract, it requires the free consent of both people. When consent is forced, the contract is defective. A marriage entered into under duress is what the law calls voidable. It stands until the coerced person asks the court to annul it. What the Vances are buying is a marriage Cassie can unwind the day she walks into a courthouse. They'd be building a house on sand. Ruth added, don't threaten, Sydney. Don't perform, just tell the truth where the right people can hear it. The next afternoon, I walked into the county clerk's office and picked up a blank marriage license application. Right there on the form, it was spelled out. Both applicants must appear in person. Both must sign their own names. No proxies. No parents signing for an adult daughter. The state requires 2 people to attest to their faces that nobody pushed them. I folded that paper into quarters and put it in my bag. It sat there for the next 2 weeks like a warm coal. Next, I went to see Pastor Dale, who was slated to perform the wedding. He is a kind man who has spent 40 years keeping the peace. I asked him, Pastor, would you be comfortable standing up there if you had real reason to believe the bride was being forced into it? He looked out the window at the cemetery, paused, and said, a pastor doesn't like to think he's part of something forced. He wasn't going to lie for my parents. I had just given his quiet discomfort a name. The truth from Cassie herself finally came on a Thursday through a locked bathroom door. I told them no, Sid, she whispered through the wood. The first night I told Mom I didn't want to. She said no isn't a word in this house. I pressed my palm flat against the door. If somebody gave you the chance to say no out loud in front of everyone, could you do it? For a long moment there was silence. I don't know, she said at last. My job wasn't to speak for her. My job was to build a single doorway and hold it open long enough for her to walk through it herself. The morning of the engagement lunch, I overheard Garrett on the side porch talking to a friend on his phone. Their engagement is handled, he laughed. Cassie is nervous, but she'll come around, they always do. The land alone is worth the trouble. Every last doubt I had evaporated. I was not breaking up a love story. I was stopping a sale. Before we left, I took Cassie up to her room, gave her a pen and paper, and said, write down exactly how you feel. Write what you'd say if you weren't scared. You don't have to show it to anyone. Just hear your own voice on paper. She wrote it, folded it small, and clenched it in her fist like a lucky stone. The church hall had been scrubbed within an inch of its life. Neighbors arrived in their Sunday clothes. The Hendersons, the Proots, and old Mrs. Calloway, who narrated the town's gossip from her porch. My father moved among them, shaking hands, while my mother glowed with victory. To her, this was love, the kind that locks the gate and calls it shelter. We took our seats. My father stood and tapped his water glass with a knife. He spoke warmly about family, roots, and how good people pull together in hard times. He raised his glass to the joining of two fine families. Then Maribeth Vance rose, thanking my parents for their good sense, repeating her favorite line to the smiling room. This isn't about feelings, it's about families. My father turned to Cassie, beaming. Cassie, stand up and say a few words of thanks to your future in-laws. The room turned to her. Cassie pushed back her chair and stood. Her face was the color of the tablecloth. Her mouth opened and nothing came out. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Under the table her thumb was turning that loose ring around and around. It was time. I stood up quietly. No scrape of the chair, no drama. Before anyone toasts, I said, my voice perfectly level, I wonder if I might ask Mrs. Vance one question. My mother's eyes shot across the table, flashing with warning and sudden fear. Sydney, my father said, low and threatening. I smiled at him. It's just one question, Daddy. I reached into my bag, took out the folded marriage license application, and set it flat on the white tablecloth. Mrs. Vance, I said, looking directly at Maribeth, when Cassie and your son go down for their license, they have to stand at that window in person and sign their own names, swearing nobody made them do it. I work in family law, so let me tell you the part nobody has mentioned. In West Virginia, a marriage forced under pressure is voidable under duress. It stands only until the person who was coerced asks a judge to undo it. And that pressure doesn't just evaporate the morning after the wedding. The room was dead silent. So here is my question, I continued. You've planned the flowers, the date, and the land that comes with it. Has anyone planned for the morning Cassie walks into a courthouse on her own and tells a judge she was forced? Because every single person at this table just became a witness that she was. My father's face went gray. Pastor Dale lowered his eyes to his folded hands. Mrs. Calloway's mouth fell slightly open. She was already rewriting the story she'd carry home. Maribeth Vance did the math behind her eyes fast. The land wasn't worth a public annulment that would drag the Vance name through the mud. The whole point was to quiet the talk, and I had just shown her that this marriage would manufacture 10 times the gossip it buried. She set down her napkin and gathered her purse. We are not going to be party to anything a court could undo. Garrett, let's go. That was when my mother came apart. She rose so fast her chair tipped over. Do you have any idea what you've done? She shrieked, her careful polish cracking down the middle. In front of everyone, the Vances. Do you know what people are going to say about this family now? She was the loudest thing in the room, and her loudness made her smaller, not bigger. I stayed in my chair, keeping my hands quiet. I let her run all the way down until she stood there breathing hard. Then I spoke softly. People are going to say a mother tried to trade her daughter to keep a name, Mama. And if that's the name you've been protecting all this time, then I'm sorry, but it was never worth keeping. My mother opened her mouth and closed it. She had no answer. Beside me, Cassie was still on her feet. She looked down at the folded paper in her fist. She didn't unfold it, she didn't need to. Hearing her own voice on paper had been enough to remind her she had one. She lifted her head, looked at our parents, the neighbors, and the Vances stalled in the doorway. Then, Cassie worked the too big ring off her finger and set it down on the tablecloth next to the legal form with a small, sharp click. "No," Cassie said. Her voice cracked, then steadied. "I never said yes. Nobody ever asked me. I don't want to marry Garrett. I want to go to nursing school. I want my own life. And I'm not going to be the thing you trade to make people stop talking." Pastor Dale stood slowly in the stunned hush. "I won't be performing any wedding," he said quietly, "that the bride didn't ask for." I took my sister's hand, and we walked out together past the silent neighbors, out into the bright, ordinary afternoon. Cassie was shaking, laughing, and crying all at once. I put her in my car. You don't have to undo a thing if you keep it from being done. The fallout came slow and total. The Vances withdrew from the wedding and the land deal. My father lost his church board seat and his bank council spot. Not over a rumor about Cassie, but because the whole town had watched a father willing to sell his daughter for a vote. That story Mrs. Calloway carried home, and it didn't wash out. That night, my mother sat at the polished table in the empty front room and told me the truth about herself. She had been 19 once with a rumor of her own. Her family had threatened to throw her out, and a fast, quiet marriage to my father was the only mercy she had ever known. She genuinely thought she was saving Cassie the same way. She thought fear was love, because fear was all anyone had ever shown her. I understood her better, but understanding isn't the same as forgiving. She still hadn't said sorry to the daughter she nearly gave away. Cassie came back to Charleston with me that week. She's in her second semester of nursing school now, exhausted, happy, and entirely herself. We still call our parents on Sundays at 6 o'clock. The door isn't bricked shut, but there's a new rule on it now, and it's a simple one. The Offit house is open to my sister anytime she wants it, on the condition that the word no is treated in that house as a complete sentence. Until then, she has a key to mine. A name you have to trap a child to keep was never a name worth saving. Consent isn't the enemy of a family, it's the proof you have one.